Okay, go ahead and call the April 2nd board retreat to order at 8:02. Members present are Paul Dixler, Paul Jensen, Brian Parks, Michael Todd, myself, Mark McGuire. Being held here, where are we? Spring Hill? Is that what it's
Spring
called?
Hill.
Sweets.
Spring Hill Suites. Do we have a picture of the flag by chance, Dr. Shutt?
No.
Shall we just forego that for a minute?
Sure.
Is everyone else okay with that since we don't have the flag? So we'll just move right into it. 2.1, discussion of mission and vision. Mr. Jensen, I believe this was one that you had wanted on here.
I just wanted to, look at it, and I think it's always good to make sure that we're all looking at what is that mission and vision, what are we focused on? What are we as a board doing to help and assist the district in kind of fulfilling that mission and vision? And what are we doing that may be distracting them, and what can we do to help just fulfill that?
Sure.
I think it's a good opportunity. I think we can, in June, we can get more into what is the adopted strategic plan, and really this board is, it really is me. Sorry. That's a train of thought. Talk about the strategic plan and just say that this is, where this board is, still wanting to go in the direction and all. But until then, it is our strategic plan, and we've got those focus areas, those goals, those objectives, and it, there's a lot in it. And so how can we think about the agenda items that come forward and just, with the new board, there's so much to learn, there's so much that, like, okay, what's that about? So, can you say more about, so there's this aspect of, sometimes it's curiosity, sometimes it's saying, this is important to me as a board member, and I would really like for the district to dig into this. And those are reasonable things that, a good steward of the district would be thinking about. But I would also ask that we look at, do they align to the strategic plan? And then help the board and help me to prioritize so that we can still make progress on the things that are in the strategic plan, because when we go and we look into and then take time to build on these new things or some different directions, it does take us away from what's in the strategic plan, and it very well could be more important and a higher priority. And I think that might be a good opportunity to come back and look at that again. So I listed for the backup material, I just listed as Paul asked for the mission and vision. And then, I don't know if these are necessarily the end-all questions that we talked about with board protocols as questions to think about when requesting agenda items or requesting reports or that sort of thing. But they seem, most things I suppose could fit into these categories because the board, appreciate the fact that you all like to celebrate the successes that are out there. I think our community needs to hear that, our children and teachers. Policy decisions, that's absolutely right in your wheelhouse, something you're gonna have to take board action on. And then there are some things that might not be in the strategic plan that, you as a board still want accountability for as a district, and that makes sense too. So, out of those 4 questions, a lot of things fit into those 4 questions. And I just don't know how to think about how to keep arrows pointing in the same direction instead of lots of different directions. It's really a lot.
One of the ways we used to do it is, and I noticed there's even a place here within the docs, board docs, is somehow keeping the strategic plan interactive with the board. Meaning we know where everything is, where things are at, what's the important things, because it is a lot of document. It does move around a little bit. I know it has it here. I know there's other applications out there that allow the board to really be interactive with it. But we can, you start popping something up and saying, hey, red flag, we got something going on here. We'll I think as a board, we need to know support.
There's some pieces, there's in this new board docs software, it does have some ability for us to do some back-end work to connect some of the board agenda items and like which ones are attached to certain focus areas within the strategic plan. That could also give you some connection
Right.
back in. And we haven't been able to fully utilize some other software we had around the strategic plan that could make it more visible and visual to all of you.
Because, we go back to that, I'm new, we got, you're not new, but you're kind of new. So, where are we? I don't, from a big deal, I can print out our strategic plan, but I have no idea.
Right.
So,
That's fair.
and or what your priorities are, because they change. So, that's the only thing I would, if I had to add anything to be helpful on that side of it, how do we, for us to be able to do better, do our job and help you, it'd be helpful if we had an understanding of where you were at.
I like the idea of being able to connect the board agenda item appropriate directly to the street plan. So not only do we know that it's something that within an agreement that we have as a board, but it's also something that the community can see.
Yeah, the other piece of that too, which sometimes policy is driven from the strategic plan.
Right.
And so it's a lot better to take a look and say, okay, well, this is coming up, this is it, this gives a heads up. We gotta start thinking about a policy around this new,
Well, the current policy actually addressed the,
or change or something, because we as the board worked with the superintendent to say, okay, well, this was important, let's get this done. Well, we gotta change the policy.
Right.
To make that happen. And so it's just,
not always for me.
well, but just the
But
ability.
it tracks it is what they say.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everything's like this, and are we going that way
Or are we
too?
going?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and again, if we can utilize some technology to make that happen, I think that would be
Make it a lot easier, that's
Well,
right.
it's already there. The same board docs actually has.
yeah, it goes into it. A little bit of work to get it there. There's some other software apps out there that actually do a much better job, but, I think it's just better, where are we at? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I'd be hesitant to learn a new system because I've just now become comfortable with board docs. I don't want to learn a new one.
Well, we don't want to do that.
Right. Michael?
No, I agree. I think, I think they, Trevor's said good points. Maybe the big key to make it easier for everybody, although I think early on maybe a jump is, I think maybe utilizing board docs to its full potential helps quick glance to be able to connect those. And that's probably a little bit of a lift for you guys to learn how to, the nuances of it or whatever, but.
And so those are gonna be on the outside, so that's gonna be the after, so that's gonna be after the agenda items come forward. We'll put them in there, you'll start to see, well, how are we doing? Are they mostly sometimes, aligned? And so then it also comes to like, what do we ask for? What are the things that we're wanting to dig more into and learn more about, or have some update reports on, that kind of thing. So I think those are ways that we can work together, because I think it's equally unique, right?
Well, in.
So I'm not always reactive, I can get back in front of you and show that.
I love electronics, here we are, we're using it all over the place, but sometimes just having a binder, to be honest, like, if we just had a strategic plan,
Okay.
if each of us kind of had a binder, we can add stuff ourselves to it, but have one for each board member, when the computer goes out, there's that, so sometimes it's easier to grab it, flip a page, find it, and honestly, our internet connection up there is sometimes, I've loaded a couple PowerPoints and halfway through the presentation,
It finally
it pops up, so if you're trying to quickly navigate, that's why sometimes I bring this, because I've got a cellular connection and I can pull it down faster than the internet side, but maybe just have that as a guide so that you can figure out how do we tie this in, and even if you're making an agenda request, probably helps you as well. You say, I'd like to add this on the agenda, I think it ties into strategic plan, whichever portion is that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the request of focuses to the mission and vision policy.
Well, I think if you put it front and center, we get back focused on, and then we're gonna be able to make a better decision based on, oh, hey, I got these 3 agenda items, but you're pushing back a critical strategic item. Well, maybe this can
Yeah,
wait.
can we wait on this one?
Yeah.
Because these
Yeah.
are more
so,
critical.
And it just, the other thing is, you know, the board is intricately associated or works with the administration to get the strategic plan done. And sometimes people forget what the heck we did.
Yeah.
Well, it's,
Because it's comprehensive,
it is.
It is.
so.
Well, thank you for that.
When I look at the strategic plan, what I look at is this is what we want. And then my thing has always been of being in the position as a supervisor, if you will, get out of the way. The person, get out of the way, let them do it. And then at the end of the year, that's when the report card comes out of, did you march to these orders here? And I think with some of the agenda, when we ask for agenda topics, that a lot of times, I think a lot of times it's curiosity. And I wonder if some of those things can actually just be taken care of within the weekly updates. Unless, of course, that's a caveat there. Of course, there's always those items that need to be publicized, I guess, to the public. You may be hearing this, but this is what's actually happening, so that they can see it. You know, we've had a couple of those things that we've actually put on there just to get out in front of stuff, get out in front of the narrative, if you will.
Yeah, and to support what you're saying, and that's why I'm saying to make sure that it's in front of us all the time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I just added, whether you call it ignorance or otherwise, I'll throw something on there and then I'll realize, she'll say, well, that's actually part of the street, you know, it's like, you know, so it's, sometimes it's just unintentional that we step on stuff, so.
Thankfully, I only have to cite the Pledge of Allegiance and not the strategic plan every meeting. Because it is unwieldy, and I agree, sometimes like, oh, geez, it was. You know, it was right there. Oh, damn.
Mr. Todd, would you please
Yeah.
state the strategic plan?
Well, it is a big document, there's a lot, there's stuff to it, so I think.
Well, like I said, I think it's also critical that we understand how the administration sees their priorities. And because it's an ever-changing document or priority list.
Well, I love that you all really do want to move our mission and vision forward, you really do. You really want to achieve that for our kids and our community, so all those things help.
Well, we help develop it to a certain extent, and if we're getting in the way, it's not helping anybody. So, and I think that just reminding ourselves of what we're doing and the priorities is gonna help.
It was just us, Michael, Mark, and I, we're the only three that were a part of the last look at the strategic plan. You have.
Paul, do you guys have the new copy? Did it start with when you were on board before?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not completely foreign, probably.
Any other discussion?
No, I like the direction.
Good, Dr. Shuff?
No, I think it's a nice focus for
Okay.
our conversations.
Item 2.2, discussion of potential policy revisions aligned to board protocols.
I tried to take a pre-look at the protocols that were adopted and to just look where I could see connections to policy. I remember from some conversation, I remember Brian, you saying that this would be an opportunity to bring something back and cement it more solidly. Some of these protocols more solidly into actual policy versus just a board adopted document. So there may be others, my first glance through trying to say, oh, here's a policy that matches up to something in it, here's another policy that matches into something. So I found 4. You all may have found something else that matters to you to think about. So I think this is really just an opportunity to say, is there anything in that adopted protocols or that you would like to see back in the section B of board policy in some way that you want me to work on? can pull up on the computer is, the protocol itself, if you wanted it. Oh, she's got it printed, I thought I lost it there for a minute. So if you
The
skip,
protocols are in there?
yep, they're in here, so right past the agenda, I made the changes that we talked about in the meeting, so hopefully this is, so maybe a way to approach this is just to let you skim through the protocols and then just highlight, I've got highlighters or pens or something, and is there anything that you think is important enough to shift into policy, or are you happy with the way it is with this agreement as it stands without making any further changes to policy?
To me, just on first blush, protocols to me, can have a specificity that policy, I believe, does not need. Policy to me is more of a blanket, whereas protocols be, okay, this is how we're actually gonna operate. As long as they remain in alignment, I don't have any problem with it. I prefer policies to be more, and I don't wanna say vague, but less specific, so that we can work within it and not be tied down. So I don't know that we need much of this, if any, in policy. But I think it's important that we know the protocols and try to live with as much as we can.
Some board policies do require process.
Well, some do need to be specific.
Yeah.
There's no question, but
Because otherwise they leave us out into the never land of interpretation.
well, I mean, when we talk about like construction of the agenda, that needs to have specificity.
Right.
But the general comment that, yeah, well,
Well, I think that's one of the comments I think she's referring to in there. There's some that I've run across and kind of like, man, it would, if we had a little more, process built into this, so we understood the steps along the way, because sometimes we get ourselves into debate over, subjective issues as opposed to, getting back to the concrete. This is where we need to go and do. It's weird because honestly, I was looking through my notes for the life of me. I can't figure out which one bugged me. And so I was like, oh my gosh, so I'm kind of put on the spot here. The one that I specifically in a policy had an issue with, I'm bringing up anyway.
Gotcha.
But
So I like that we adopted these. And the one thing that, going to some of the seminars that they put on ASBA for some, that really struck me is the one that we adopted that I thought was important was when action is taken and you're on the minority side, that you can't continue to bring that up with the same board. But if a new board member comes on, then that board member can bring it up. I think that was important because I always envisioned somebody continuing to hammer on something until the board just caved and just didn't want to hear about it no more. You know what I mean? But then it also gave the opportunity for it to be brought up in case, like, say, new information came up, or a new board, and maybe that board member had a unique perspective that maybe hadn't been looked at, things of that nature, so that it was, we're not gonna keep hammering on this, but we're also gonna adapt for the possibility.
I don't know, it's just, there's always some of these nuances and things, because you don't know, how do you put into policy or kind of the structure of something that's, I might use the word subjective again, meaning we know what something looks like when it's being abused, right? But we still need to have the opportunity to let people if there's new information or whatever to keep bringing. This is, I think, one of the ongoing issues we deal with the board, which is we have to be careful because you don't want to hammer something into a policy to the point where you're stuck. You know, I don't know how you do that. It's like, I think we'll have to certain extent, you gotta be grown-ups about the whole thing and understand that, you know, look, I'll give you an example on the discipline thing. When I went through that, I had an idea what to do. You already had something going within the administration. I mean, so sometimes just bringing that up and letting other members know that this is important to you, the administration is important to you, and then slowly thereafter, you start seeing things move. You shouldn't have to keep bringing stuff up.
Gotcha, yep.
So, like I said, I don't know how you create,
Right.
to me, it's tough because, the one thing that we try to do because we're having an issue here to turn around and buy us in the backside over here. So,
To Paul's point about how exclusive the policy is.
right,
I
right.
wonder if, I mean, this same thing happens, and it's not always the best example. Mark, I'll agree with you sometimes when you talk about downtown. But they do a caucus, which is essentially a work session. And I just wonder if we would eliminate some of those issues if we had a work session once a month or something of that nature, where we bring an agenda item up and you can kind of, in a work session, say, we got this, we're working on this. And maybe we reduce, city councils do it, the Maricopa County supervisors, they had 89 items on their agenda the last meeting. It took them like an hour and 15 minutes to get through the whole meeting. They had work session and had some updates. So I realize that's an extra meeting, which I'm really not about creating more meetings, but on the same token, does that reduce us so that by the time we're at 10 o'clock at night, I'm even sure sometimes when I've asked for an agenda item,
I've seen this done in a different way. The Prescott Unified School District at one point went from one meeting went to two. And the second meeting that they added was a business meeting. It was strictly what you're describing. It was more of a caucus than it was, but it was open to the public. It met all the open meeting laws.
I say just be careful of us staying on topic with the board protocols.
Right.
It's easy, because this is so
right.
encompassing so many
Right.
things, so just be careful.
That was my thing, and I think I know where you're saying, but just a little more discussion where we can hit some things off at the pass, maybe. So maybe we create a protocol or something of that nature. And the only other one that I would think of, kind of along those lines, is we've had a couple instances, I think the last meeting where you said we don't have a procedure. We just misspoke on the motion. I just didn't add the next part of it.
Right.
So if we have some more rules where I went back, I was like, how do we do that? And then I thought to myself, well, we also don't have, it just says we vote yes or no. I think in a previous meeting, you had voted present, which our policy doesn't really have that. So I think under this policy revision, maybe we just need to look at that. Does that, am I on tap still?
So, I could make a note, because we did have it in the protocols of the board, the previous board looked at, we had a section, Nikki didn't have that section here. We had a section in here that said, here's a more precise explanation of our process for how we move board agenda items through, or like the board president can help it and how the board members interact. That's not in here. And then when you look at our policy is even lighter than what that was. So that could just be something we talk about in a future agenda item, to talk about that as a policy, and I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, it was gonna be one. I was gonna bring it up.
Yeah,
When we put this one together, this one was already together, so you know what I mean? So I couldn't put it on here, but that was gonna be the next one that I asked for, was just that.
So in regular communication, so it's almost like the during the meeting part,
Yeah.
it's like we're missing something there, the during the meeting that
Right,
could just as easily be in policy as in the protocol itself.
exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll add it out.
Mr. Jensen, do you have anything, this topic?
I worry about getting much more than 2 meetings a month, so, you know, whether we, just make sure and stay on this, as we're kind of preparing meetings and getting through it, is some way that we can get more information through at a quicker pace. And then also watch ourselves that if we agree to something kind of at a prior meeting, that we stick to that at the later. You know, sometimes as we're doing budgets, well, it's a great idea to change or add it. I think it's difficult if we're switching things from what we agreed to, right? This is what we think the budget's gonna be. Oh, well, let's add more, you know,
Whatever it may
increase
be.
the salary to administrators. Well, we can't change.
What if we, because I agree, like as I said, more meetings is not always the best. But if you were to make an agenda, you want to talk about A, you know, and then Paul says, yeah, I'll go with that. Maybe we have staff, and again, I know this is a little bit more, but maybe they can get on a call with you the following day or something, or soon, so it's still fresh, to people who agree to it. And say, and understand, okay, where are you trying to, you know, and then in your case, when you were kind of talking about discipline, a few of us back that idea. Dr. Shuck gets on the call, gets on with you really quick. We can't have a quorum per se, but there can be two. And say, oh, I'm already looking at hiring a disciplined person. At that point, that might have triggered you to say, let me withdraw that request. I don't want to speak for you specifically, but you go, oh, this is already in the works. We're kind of bound, we don't always know. You're a future thinker, you're thinking sometimes maybe 10 years, you know, but we could stop some of that and then it comes up on an agenda, but we might be able to eliminate that, which then would shorten our meetings, which it would be nice to, the public can stay for the whole thing. I've heard a lot of people say, I can't be here until 11 o'clock at night, I get you, right? But maybe that would provide more clarification, is that'd be something to eliminate having more meetings, but that way everybody knows what's going, yeah.
I think we already, well, we can see future agendas being built
Mhm.
when we, as far as the
Right.
board.
But like in the position of the discipline, Brian brought up, you wanna talk about discipline, I think Paul was saying that too.
Well, I actually brought it up quite a while.
Right, so wherever that was, but I don't think Brian, at the time when he made that request, knew that Dr. Shelf was looking at hiring a discipline coordinator, was that? Behavioral, yeah, so if that's countered later, he might say, oh, well, let me back that off for a minute. Let's see where this goes, or have a little better, a little more discussion. He might be able to withdraw that from the, we can make a note in the board, this was withdrawn, so the request on this day was withdrawn because, staff meeting. There's been a few things I wanted on the agenda, and I talked to Dr. Shuff, and she's like, oh, I'm working on that. Oh, I'm not gonna bring, we don't need to bring it up.
Well, that's kind of where I was with this one, I assumed it was in the works somewhere.
Yeah,
We had had a discussion about, annual reports and so on, so I was just assuming it was gonna be coming up.
it's interesting because there's only one person sitting in the room that knows how many people are invested in something independently.
Well, and that's
So.
So I think what they're asking is possibly a follow-up on the agenda, just a verification. And if you had any information that was already in the works, that you can let them know, hey, such and such is already in the works. You still want to talk about it, or do you want to wait and see what we come up with and see if that aligns to?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, because what and this is interesting because we got to just on the same kind of subject, we have to get back to kind of really working with that exchange with Dr. Schaff on the agenda items, so we understand, because we spend a lot of time in our meetings going over stuff that really, a lot of it, I think, should have been done prior to being in the public board meeting. So I think the reason we have 3-hour board meetings is we didn't prep ourselves to the extent we needed to.
So I'm making a note in our communication protocol, let's see, it would be on the right category. Non-agenda items, board meeting preparation. maybe it's the future board agenda, I just left it, bottom of page 2, this is the header. I'll look for a place in here that just says something along the lines of superintendent will follow up, which I typically do, but sometimes not right exactly after the board meeting, to say, what did you really mean by that, what is it you were really wanting to have on the agenda, or sometimes you guys will email me with a little bit more information about what you
Well,
meant by that.
especially if we bring up something that the administration's working
Yeah.
on behind the scenes and we're
Okay.
just not aware of.
Right. Well, I will make a note in
Because
this.
again, I don't wanna step in the middle of something intentionally, so, or unintentionally.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
No, I appreciate that.
And I don't know that has to be immediately after, I mean.
Just as I start to plan for these things, I'll
Right.
start to go, I don't really exactly know what you meant by that, like I called you on one thing, oh, it's me.
Mhm.
Like,
Well, and even your call before, the meetings, if it's not something that you think is just, but you have some information, did you still want this on the agenda? Yeah, I mean, because, Paul's point, I don't know if it has to be completely meeting,
Okay.
it's just the information being brought forward, just because, like I said, look, if we can push something down the road a little bit, I think I've even suggested doing that with a few
you
items.
did.
So, it's like it's not that critical.
Okay, well, I'll work on some of that between meeting communication, that can support that.
Good. Okay, item 2.3, discussion of board organization meeting, board policy, BDA. Mr. Parks.
First comment out of my mouth, I'm gonna apologize for how I handled this previously. I could have done it in a much better manner.
Thank you for that.
I've been in a number of different board environments, just finished up with an LD. Organizational meetings are clearly done before anything else is done, especially when there's a transfer of, we'll call it power, but transfer of the president. I'm more concerned about consistency. Making sure, because let's assume that the president didn't get reelected. Coming into that, you have no choice but to have a separate organizational meeting because there is no one to prepare or to approve the regular meeting. So it was my thought that just to make this, because I've kind of gone back and forth. I don't see any downside in just saying, look, can we just make this an independent, they're the first item of the year, independent of a regular meeting. And as far as I'm concerned, you could roll into, with a 5-minute recess into the regular meeting. I don't really care,
So you're
but.
still helping with the efficiency of it all.
Right, I just think it'd be much more helpful coming into the new year of saying, this is the first thing we're doing, we're gonna get this out of the way, and then we can go ahead and then move into regular meeting. The other thing is if there's a potential, we already know that there's a different person taking on the role of president, either somebody isn't running or they're not. That makes it that much easier that we don't get into the middle of creating the agenda for the regular and wait for that next person to go ahead and work with you to get that finished. So
I hear 2 different things. One, just as I'll just call it a point of order, you have an organizational meeting and then you go right into the next one. You go right into the next one, somebody has to be working with me a week and a half ahead of time to have an agenda ready to go. So the other point you're making was like, well, and if there's an absence of a person coming in, then that's a
You're
different,
kind of
a
in
different situation.
you're kind of in, so there's some of this that I'd like to say, look, can we change the the protocol with this and say, look, this is gonna, we'll just lay it out, say this is the first independent meeting prior to a regular meeting. I don't think anybody's gonna throw up their arms and say, oh, well, you created the agenda and then, somebody says, okay, well, whether it's previous president or whatever. But we still have to make some sort of terms of the fact that, and I just don't see this happening, I'm just throwing it out, that you have another president that's been appointed or voted in that wants to do something different with the agenda. So, I'm just throwing it out there because I see these issues. And I just would like to have some, the process be really clear so we know what we're doing year after year after year after year, and the board's ready for it. And that's why I brought it forward. And like I said, I've been involved with countless boards and they all do it the same way.
Brian, just so I understand what you're talking about, what really the only difference I hear you saying is that you would like to have set up, so there's two separate meetings. The first one would be the organizational, and once that has been accomplished, then you roll right into the other.
You can
As
have it,
opposed to having, which, to be honest, has been my experience most of the
right,
time,
right.
is that the board meets in a regular meeting, the first thing on the agenda is reorganization, and then the rest of the meeting just continues. So, I don't have any problem with it being separated out. Because I
It
think we
just
do
makes-
that in other occasions.
Well, right,
Other
it just,
things.
the other thing is if there is a change in the president, it gives us the ability to do ahead and just do a 5-minute recess, or in between, take 5 minutes and change things around if that's what needs to happen.
Well, I have had that experience. There was a board meeting where it was unexpected that a new board president was elected,
Just checking,
which
sorry.
surprised everybody. And we just continued on the meeting, it was done. The organization reorg occurred and we just went on. The next board meeting, the old president was reelected. So it does get ugly.
I understand, it's just for me, I think for process, it'd be helpful if we just separated the two coming in and just, we can, it's more technical than it is anything else.
And I have no problem.
I feel like the organization meeting needs to happen early in that year.
Well, I think it has to happen within a certain window.
Well, it does, but like in the last one, we had other board meetings. We had some work sessions were called to order, but we have to have, well, I think maybe the first thing is we define, when does the president's term expire?
So
Does it expire at December 31st, or does it expire on?
that's the
First-
thing that we've got to be careful of, is what you don't want to create a situation where you have an absence of leadership.
Right.
So you want to make, so that's why it doesn't have an end date, is because of the absence of leadership. So in the event that somebody's coming off, or, just until you actually do hire the next person, you've got to
Because
continue this
our
person
problem
until
though
the
is
end.
that if you have a board president who is currently the board president, he's in his 4th year, on December 31st, his term as the board expires, we are without leadership.
Technically, yes.
No, technically.
Well,
I mean, you would have a meeting and then I guess you
So-
would pick somebody.
Read
So-
DDA, and
Yeah.
so look for what kind of language you would want to add or change. And then just be cognizant of, we don't want to take away this idea of, to have an absence.
Well, if the key is if we pushed it as forward as we can in the year,
So I understand, and I don't disagree that if we want to have a split in meetings, that's fine. I have no issue with that. To your point, what you're talking about is that's already taken care of. It's already in here. It says right here, the meeting shall be called to order by the president of the board for the preceding year.
But that's an organizational meeting.
They don't have to be, let's just say, obviously it's me, in his 4th year, and they fire me. The way that I read this is come January 1st. There's the 5 of y'all, well, there'd end up being 6.
Yeah.
And my little thing would last 30 more seconds of all that power.
Right.
But no, right?
Right,
I would
that's-
call it,
yeah,
and then
right. So
y'all would vote, and then that's it.
I
And then
think
the 5-minute
easiest-
recess,
I
and I'm out.
think the easiest thing to do is put in here, it's the first, this would be the first meeting and item of the year,
First, yeah,
before you
action
do
item.
anything.
Okay,
That would cover any other things we do, so, as a board, push that forward as much as we can get away with it.
And then, and you would like to see, and you all support the idea of having it be just how the agenda is structured, that it's kind of call an order, recess, so something like that shows the division of that.
So there would be an organizational meeting. And then, that would be the very first meeting to take place, would be an organizational meeting, and then subsequent meetings thereafter. Does that sound right?
Now, I do have a
Mr.
question.
Jensen, your thoughts? You've been in this seat before.
So I agree with that essentially, and so you'd notice two separate meetings. And the first meeting that the board is able to do is the organizational meeting. And there's no other meeting.
That also prevents us from any other issues coming up that then we have to worry about and think about, like somebody not getting reelected. It's the same every year, and we're not gonna get ourselves into any sort of trouble or discussion. Well, now what do we do? Hopefully, assuming that we keep doing the same thing, it won't change anything.
I have a question about some of the text here, in the BDA. Second paragraph, second sentence, if that person is not a member of the board. So that would take care of the scenario that you're talking about, where let's say, fourth year, not reelected to the board. Technically, that person would not be a member of the board any longer on December 31st.
Well, actually,
So-
the way I read this though
It says
is,
a temporary president shall be elected. Is
Right.
that not already a process in place?
well, the deal is here is the way I see this is the meeting should be called in order by the president of the board for the preceding year. So it doesn't matter if they're reelected or anything else.
Yeah.
If they're available,
To me, those two statements contradict themselves.
Yeah, if that, because
To
it
me,
makes
what
sense
it
if
is
that
is
person
like-
is not a member of the board. So it doesn't matter if he's available or not, if he's not elected, chose not to run.
You've got five people, they could be all five new.
Yeah.
If that person is no longer on the board, a temporary president shall be elected, and the meeting's called to order. As soon as it's called to order. you
I think
select
the
somebody-
wording should, if that person is not available. The previous
I
president.
don't think you can have a person that was not
Not
elected
elected.
and not part of the
So,
board call.
I
a board
think
meeting.
this first sentence.
Sure you can. Superintendent can call the boards,
I've done that
can call the
before.
board to order. The superintendents all over the state do that all the time.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so if the president is out, all of a sudden it's called out, I start the meeting and then I turn it
Turn it
over to the
over.
board to
Yeah.
say who's the temporary person who's gonna run this
That's how you
meeting,
did that.
and then we go from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's
And
even
that's how I would
situations the
say
boards have vice
it
presidents
has
or second in orders.
So that's another thing, right? And that's the thing that I've thought about when it comes to organizational. And I don't know that we actually have actual policy for our district, and that might be something more to talk about and bring up. There's other districts within the organization that have president, they have vice chair,
Right, that's
and
right.
then they have,
Often I see a president and a clerk who reads all the
clerk, I was
vouchers
gonna
and
say,
signs off on it.
there was, I was gonna say secretary, I couldn't remember what clerk, that I've seen it, I'm just, okay, I don't.
Well, that also gives, just say you in a situation that you're just not available, we don't want to blow up the meeting for example, and move somebody else.
So that's,
We've done that, Mike shared one time.
yeah, that is, when I was sick, that is something, that, can be looked at in another agenda topic. But on this agenda topic, I don't have me personally, and it doesn't sound like anyone else does, of having the two. It does sound like there's a little bit of contention in this second paragraph. And I read it the way that Brian reads it. And then, to me, the second statement within it, to me, the way that I read that is, if somebody, like if the board has just blown up and we've had multiple people at the same exact time resign, that's the way that I read that.
I read it a little bit differently.
I mean-
The first sentence is the meeting shall be called to order by the president of the board. If that person, the president of the board for the preceding year, is not a member of the board, in other words, they're no longer on the board anymore, a temporary president shall be elected, and the meeting shall be called to order by the temporary president.
That's a problem there, because how do you take action? So the first sentence, the meeting shall be called to order by the president of the board for a preceding year. So, as is the case this past year, you were the president in 2021. When we came into 2022, we had to have an organizational meeting. You were the sitting president from the previous year, and you were still on the board, so you called it to order.
Right.
But this year, Mark, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself, but if you chose to not run for reelection or not reelected or whatever, that's what this next sentence is. Now you're no longer a member of the board to call that meeting to order. So then a temporary president should be elected and the meeting shall be called to order. But how does a board take action you can't take action without having a meeting to order?
Yeah, but this gives you the authorization.
Right, I think this says you can do that.
Yeah,
It's in policy.
authorization. And see, well, the way I read that is,
But how do you, so you don't call the meeting to order, you just get together and say who's gonna run this thing?
That's where
Oh,
Dr.
you
Shuff.
reorganize,
Yeah.
and then
That's
that's.
I just step in, I say,
But
we
this says the
have
meeting shall
temporary-
be called to order by the temporary president. It doesn't say Dr. Shuff should call the meeting to order, it says this shall be called to order by the temporary president.
As soon as you gather, you immediately say, can we agree on who will be the temporary president? They'll say, I agree, it's Paul Bixler. Paul Bixler calls the meeting to order, immediately go into saying who you really want to do it for long term.
I think it's pretty straightforward. I know it can be confusing, but I think it's, look, if you have if the preceding year's president is still on the board, it's obvious, right?
Right.
If they're not, then we have to say out of who's left sitting at the dais, okay, who here's gonna run this, and we're to.
Albeit for just a temporary period of time.
Right.
Just through the process of reorganizing.
Correct.
Right, and again, this is why, to me, it's so critical this is a completely separate meeting, because this could get really strange in a regular meeting.
And the first one that we do. for the
Right,
year.
yeah.
So it needs to be the first.
Yeah.
Before we do anything else. The next thing on this is a little bit weird is the fourth paragraph. Whenever there is a vacancy in the office of president, the board shall elect a new officer to fill the vacancy during the unexpired term of office.
Right.
Is that their entire term of office, or is that, because we haven't
Their
defined it.
entire term. The term of office.
Right, so,
Terms
but,
are
so what's
whether
weird
you're
with
a
that
2-year
though,
or a 4-year.
is if you,
So if I lose this year, that this organizational meeting will take place in December. That's what this says.
In the past, we've always done it basically on a 2-year rotation. So
is
you
it
know,
2 year or 1 year?
we've done it 2 years because the assumption was you get in and the president, it's the same board for that next 2 years.
But we did 1 year, this.
Well, the board can call for it anytime they want to.
We've had a different board. The board hasn't been the
Every 3
same
months.
for years.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
you could, to Paul's point, you could elect somebody by January 15th as your president, and then come back the next month and say, I'd like to do it again. So you've got that in your policy that allows that at any time.
Well, yeah, because technically, in the experience I've been in other situations, the board can call an organization meeting anytime it wants.
Mhm.
And for any reason it wants to. And so, that's always sitting there. So that paragraph's covering, the board's had it with the president, we're gonna elect somebody else, so.
Well, that's the final one, I get, okay.
So
So I think we just want to make sure that it's in writing.
the first meeting of the year will be an organization meeting separate from the regular meeting
Right.
or study session.
Any other
Any of them.
meeting.
First order of business of the year.
All right, that's progress.
Before we move on to 2.4,
Oh, no.
can we take a 5-minute break? It's early in the morning, I've had a lot of coffee.
Paul, I'm sorry, but you're not recognized. Go ahead, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll just keep everything rolling.
Okay.
We're moving along pretty good so far. I think we'll allow that, right?
that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just sit around looking at everybody, like, somebody please ask for the recess, so I don't have to do it. Where are they at?
Yoga class or massage in the little way.
You know what? It's funny, my Lifetime Fitness we go to is right there, so when I'm done here, that's where I'm heading. My wife, she's already, she does, I tell you, if you want the best club in the world, I think they have one close to you. So it's all inclusive, but they do all the yoga classes, Pilates, I mean, everything you can imagine. It was funny, it took a little bit to get my wife kind of going, but now it's like, and you know what's interesting? I mean, she's physically just in the last 6 months and stuff. Well, I mean,
Just strong.
oh my God. And she feels so much better, which is the key. She loves her yoga. She loves it. Every class she can get into, she's in. So.
No, I'm still paying the price for last Saturday's work. Favorite
You'll
story,
see,
right?
You'll see me every once in a while. They're gonna, you're looking, yeah, you understand. I just did a leg workout. I'm like, thinking to myself, man, like, oh. My wife, can't you just go easy? You know what the fun part is? There's this little ego here. Yeah, I'm 57 years old. And I walk in there and I look better than just about anybody.
No, that's motivation.
It's just like,
Motivation.
I get to come out. You look great for 40. Well, thank you.
I'll take that.
Refill so we can have another meeting. Right?
Yeah, there we go.
To the right, to the right. Yeah.
Plans the rest of the day?
Watch General Conference. Sort of church every 6 months.
Okay.
It has the prophet and they like get on and basically give kind of motivational speeches and like what you should do. Really good. I always love it.
Good speakers and
Yeah. They're always old wise men and
Yeah.
women.
a lot of
You know,
wisdom and
And it's just so good. I have a ton of family traditions on it. It's a lot of fun. So.
nice. Nice.
How about you?
I'm heading north. So I was not very smart between my personal life and my professional life. The calendars are not the same. And I did not say, no, I can't have a board retreat on Saturday, August 2nd when my entire family, extended family is going camping. So I got them loaded up and out the door yesterday afternoon. And when we finish here, I will be getting in the car and joining them like about the end of our camp trip, right?
Where are they?
I found a program.
Houston, Mesa, we're right outside Houston, so it's not quite as high elevation. I imagine I'll be freezing, so I'll probably.
It's got a program called One Calendar, which costs about $10, and it merges all of your calendars together. So I never look at my district calendar. I just go to one calendar and it colors.
If I do it on my phone, it works that way for
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
But
The computer
but
doesn't.
frankly, I'm looking at my computer at work
Right,
all day
right.
long, every day to
One
make
calendar goes on the
decisions.
phone, on the computer too, and cross-platform, Mac or PC.
Okay, well,
So I just use it for.
I'll make a note of that because, I'm not really happy with myself right now.
Wouldn't be there.
What's going on?
She's supposed to be camping.
Overrated, right?
Let them
I'm
get
gonna
up
get
there,
some pine
get it all
trees.
Get it
unloaded.
all set up. Did they go last night or today?
They went up last night.
Yeah, it'd be
Oh, that's good. They
all
got camp set
unloaded.
up. All you gotta do is show up.
Yeah, just show up.
That's great.
Make sure he's got your lawn chair sitting out too.
No kidding. I think you tiny.
Well, he went up with my daughter and two kids, cause her husband was on shift, so I'm
Oh,
gonna
was
be taking the firefighter up with me.
Oh.
So it was my husband, my daughter, and two kids, and then my other son and
Yeah.
his kid and extended family.
And where's the camping at?
My son got a big, family campsite in, right outside Payson,
Where?
right outside Payson.
Oh, Paisley. Oh.
Yeah.
My son was conceived at Christopher Creek, right outside Paisley.
Okay, too much information for our audience.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Thank you, whoever, Paulie.
it up in Rainbow too. Yeah. Wonderful rainbow.
You get fun, you home.
You know what I've noticed at our ranch is that, I don't know why, there's like thousands of grasshoppers.
I know.
Like that,
Really?
thousands and
I don't see
thousands.
any mine.
You know, that's biblical service, the same time stuff, right?
Yeah, I hope it was wrong.
That's what I was saying, like, so, it's that Thursday, when I opened the gate and I went in and I'm driving down the road, like, it's just like, and they keep coming. And that was the first thing on my head. I just looked up.
Yeah. Looking for other signs, right?
They changed it to grasshopper ranch, or you was like,
Maybe
You
that
know,
profit
I'm
that
just-
board
I'm
meeting a
just
few times
saying.
back.
I was
was
saying,
with
I told
grasshoppers.
Robin about it, and she just started laughing. So, it's just a springtime. All right,
That's
we'll go ahead and get back into order here. Left off 2.3 on to 2.4. Discussion of potential policy requiring board members to secure a background fingerprint clearance prior to interaction with children. So I asked for this I asked Dr. Shuck to put this on here. One thing that I noticed, this is not in policy. We're the only ones
I don't know.
within the district, and I was just gonna say, and before I put it on here, I just went through like randomly and just started clicking other districts, nothing in legislation.
Right.
That says it, nothing. And so I'm just like, okay, wow, this is something that probably nobody has ever thought of.
California.
Do they? Right. And I'm just thinking to myself, this,
But
We need
they
something
have a
like this.
problem and it's an ongoing problem. I'll tell you
Yeah,
what
but
it is.
Arizona has requirements. If you're gonna be in contact with a child, you have to go through the fingerprint process. I had actually a couple times while we were visiting campuses, because I did have conversations with children, because I had gone through the Buckeye Union process,
Yeah.
the
The difference is-
fingerprint and all that, and as an educator, you do anyway. But,
well, that's if you're a permanent volunteer, right? So
Right.
somebody could come in, once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. Somebody of a very less tasteful human being, you know what I mean? And that this is the loophole. So I just wanted to see if everyone's okay with this. Is
So-
it being in policy, our policy for us?
For the board members.
Yeah, for board
So
members.
let's play this out.
Yep.
Let's assume we're an elected official that comes back less than glamorous. What then?
You can't have contact with the children.
Okay.
They
Okay.
can
I
still
just,
be a board.
Oh, no, you're still a board member,
Right.
don't get me wrong.
well, and you can't. There's nothing you can do.
There is no mechanism, right, well,
Yeah.
there's one mechanism, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just something to be cognizant about. Look, as far as I'm concerned, see, I looked at this and I saw this as something actually a little more than just a good policy. I looked at it as public relations wise, it looks like we're doing the right thing. I mean, right, because, oh, wait, the board has an exception to the rule and I have to go, to the certain.
I guess I didn't think about it that way.
Well,
Yeah, but I get it, but now that you bring that up, as soon as you said it, I thought,
so the law requires you to get a fingerprint if you're working individually with a child, right? Is that what it is?
It's actually just a contact at all.
No, I don't think, I don't.
I'm
think it is.
sure that there's some type
Yeah,
of
if you have
specific.
one-on-one, like if you're solo with a child.
Well, we have two, and I put them in here
That's
just
not
so
the
you
way-
see the difference. The very last page of this little packet are the two ways that we do things. I just wanted you to be sure if you were thinking about some policy to know that there's a difference between the two. One is a background check and one is a fingerprint clearance. So you can see there's a difference of level there. So our support staff and our volunteers is who we do fingerprint background checks for. So if a parent is going on a field trip, with kids, we make them do the background check. If they're if they're coming in to, you know, work in the classrooms, you know, with kids at all, we have them do the background check and the support staff. And then our teachers or people who we would leave alone, you know, with the kids, you know, like a certified teacher's responsibility, with them. Our support staff, you know, we all know that there are times support staff are covered for somebody who's going to the bathroom, or we just don't even have covers and we're up creek. You know, so it's not entirely true that they're, you know, never left alone with kids, but generally that's kind of a distinction we make on those two things of how we.
So for me, and when I thought about this, and then I saw that no districts had this, well, very few, very, very few. And I was thinking, and then I thought, and I was like, there was a legislator, and I couldn't remember, I just remember reading about it, that he had done something in the Midwest.
Mhm.
And I looked and I couldn't find it. I just remembered reading something. I couldn't remember all the details. But anyways, this guy had done something. And I believe that whenever he got in trouble for it, whatever it was, served his punishment, but then came here and got elected. And that nobody knew about it until after he was elected, and then it came out, and immediately when he came up for re-election, I don't believe he got re-elected. I don't remember who it was, I just remember seeing it, and that was the first thing that I thought of with the fingerprinting, of that, that's something that goes in background, that it doesn't matter where you come from, that there's gonna be a record of it, and that, like you said, that it's good prudence with the public, and that people should know that.
Well, I think what you said about it not permitted, they're elected, you can't, that, they're elected.
No, right.
So they still do the job, they come to board meetings, they do those things that maybe they wouldn't, you know, come walk through classrooms with me, or, you know, go to interactive carnival with kids or something.
But I'm not sure if you have that, so if they're with you, they're not alone.
That's true too.
So by not letting them do that, that could potentially keep them from carrying out their duties of.
So I'll just go ahead and put this out here too, of that worst case scenario, in the future, a board member falls under this and they're a creep. And it comes out and they're elected. When it comes out after they're elected, I would envision that the public would put so much pressure on that individual that individual would have no choice but to resign.
Well,
That would be my hope.
you have
of
another
this,
thing
right?
too, it gives the tools for the administration to see you're not going there.
There's always that too.
You know,
Right.
There
Yeah.
is always that,
You know, because I honestly, look,
yeah.
there's already something regulatory in the administration for this for volunteers. We're technically volunteers, we're technically fit under that, yeah. I don't see anything wrong with this. I just, you know, I can support this. It's
I think it's a really good idea, and it showed a bit of proactivity on our part, which I also like. I like the hobby.
Well, yeah, because look, we see what's going on in the world today. And the thing is, you know, there's gonna be a backlash, and I don't wanna be sitting in the middle of it.
Well, if we can recognize that there might be an issue, we have a solution, right? At least
No, we did our due
Protect
diligence,
us
we've
from
already
right
did
in front
it,
of
because the thing is, you know, we could end up, we don't know what's coming next year. We don't know, as we sit here.
Can't prevent everything, but you can darn sure be prepared.
Well, but you could be
take
proactive, the proactive
Yeah.
piece of giving the
That's what it
tools
says
for
on
the
this.
administration to say, you know what, you're barred from going to the schools or whatever it is.
Right, whatever it may be. Mr. Jensen, your thoughts?
Yes, that's DPS. Yeah, go ahead.
I like that. Some of this on here, to me, when I read it, it sounded like if you didn't pass, then
Yeah,
Right, and that's not the case.
No.
Another one on here that it talks about is and credit check from the Paradise
Yeah, I don't
Schools.
think we'll be doing.
Did I miss that one?
Okay, so just
Yeah.
so you know, I did not intend for you to say, oh, this is policy, we should not. It was just like, I couldn't find anything on this, and this was the
That
closest
was
thing
my
I came.
assumption. Yeah, that was my
And I'm not trying to,
Because you can't
I don't
take us
mean
off the
anybody.
board, and you can't, I don't like the credit check.
you
Yeah,
can pay your
Because
bills.
that was school board.
I missed that one, I'm sorry, I didn't even.
or
I
not
think-
School board, but,
I'm pretty
charter.
sure they were charter school, which
Charter.
it was
It was.
interesting, I didn't know ASBA, did any for charters, so that's interesting.
Except your credit, we'll check yours.
Okay, so give me a few big general ideas. Typically what I do is I try to craft something and then I work with the attorney to, you know.
Well, why
put
can't
together-
we keep it similar to the volunteers?
All right, I'll look for that.
I kind of like that of, you know, we're a board member, we should follow the same statute
Right.
as the volunteer.
Now, you're talking about each one, because there's two different processes.
I did not think of that, I can pull up on the computer the volunteer policy if you wanted to take a quick look at that, or do you want me to just bring something back to the board around
Let's just
that?
bring something back
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
we can take a look at it in our time before the meeting and then make a little jot if there was something in it that we thought.
Yeah, I think,
And then that's back in public too.
keeping
How
it
often,
consistent
how
with
often do we do
volunteer.
these? Is this yearly? And the only reason why I ask too is because I know Australia does their big move-on, but they do that off campus, so they don't have to do background checks on volunteers. So during school day.
I can only speak to Buckeye Union, and it was yearly. So that when COVID hit, I didn't pursue it because I wasn't going back in
Right.
classrooms anyway. So I haven't pursued it since then, but it was yearly.
The clearance card, that's good for several years.
Really?
5.
Interesting.
The
It's
clearance
good for
file.
5 years.
Which one is that?
But
The ICP fingerprint clearance.
is that because, I don't want to holler at you if we're getting off here, this is more just a curiosity thing for me. Is that because it is linked to public safety? So that if you get in trouble, DUI, whatever it may be, does it throw a red flag?
Yes, it
Okay,
triggers.
so
When it
it's
happens, it'll trigger,
it's
we get
communicating.
notifications.
agencies are communicating together, got you,
Yes.
okay,
No speeding through the kids' zone at school.
right, okay.
So which one are we recommending for doing, the IVP or the fingerprint background check?
I would say we're doing whichever one you prefer. The fingerprint background is good for 1 year, the IVB is for 5. So you can choose which way you want to go.
Also, let board members choose, because if they wanna do it one time and not have to mess with this again.
Correct.
I think that should just be policy. Just get it. Really? If there wants
So-
to.
Yeah.
Now, because both of these talk about who pays for it.
Well, I mean,
I think the district pays
the
for it.
district's
That's
gonna
what I
pay
think
for it.
too, especially the
That's-
board.
I mean, I think I don't think the taxpayers would be upset for $52.
Well, it's almost a.
Well, I was looking at,
67 plus.
I was looking at the 20 for volunteers and then 32 for the live scan charge.
Yeah, but there's 67 in DPS also.
Yeah,
Alright, oh, I
we pay
thought
for
they
it
were
all.
all the same, yeah, okay, well,
No, I think the district pays for that. All right, I'll bring back
So,
something for
what
you
I
guys to look
wonder-
at.
okay, so while we're still on this, to your point, what I think is, I understand what you're saying as far as, every 5 or whatever. I wonder if this is tied to that board member's term.
Do we make?
So if you're on a 2-year term, I'm on a 4-year term.
It's gonna come back 5 years regardless.
Well, what I'm saying is that if a board member reruns and gets reelected, then it gets run
Oh,
when they get reelected.
so he may have only used 4 of the 5, but do it again to get another 4.
Right,
Get another
because
5.
this is the mechanism why I want this, because I thought about this also, what happens. The mechanism is that I don't want this to happen to somebody when they're not on the board anymore. That this doesn't get run, so that's why I wanted language in there that said, term. So that they're not affected anymore.
Let me just look into how that
Okay.
functions.
Yep.
Cause I think you're trying to protect somebody's privacy.
That's
when they go off the
exactly
board
what I'm
and
trying to
then have
do.
it do that, so
But
let me just
yep.
look into that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering who would get it reported. let's say that somebody's off the board and they do something that would show up on here. If they're no longer on the board, would anybody even look? Would we even see it? I mean,
That's what I'm talking about. I don't even want that.
Yeah,
That's a privacy thing. And that when somebody's off the board, it doesn't matter. It's nobody's business.
They don't even give you any information back on it. They just say yes or no, or do they say, here it is, you decide, how does that work?
You mean like if we get a report on somebody that
Yeah.
comes back?
Right.
So we'll get something back with, a future employee and it said, 20 years ago, they committed a felony.
Okay.
And then, there's decision made, sometimes like, that's just, I'm sorry, we just can't do anything about that.
So you make that decision.
We have to, particularly, we make the decision of, like, if it had anything to do with kids or CPS, or like, yeah, sorry, it was 20 years ago, but you are not,
Gotcha.
yeah, it just comes down
Okay.
to how many battles do you want to fight?
Right,
And if you have somebody who comes back dirty on a background check, do you really want that person so bad that you're willing to?
Oh, yeah, no, I agree.
you get clearance, you get a decision from them, we don't make the decision whether there's
Okay.
a clearance or not.
Okay.
And then if there's any ticks that happen on, it, even though they may still, we're gonna give you clearance, but just so you know, these things are here.
Right.
We still have a choice of like hiring or not hiring. In this case, they're a board member regardless.
Right.
Right.
But they either have the clearance or they don't have the clearance, which would then trigger for us, can we go into classrooms or not?
But if they're with somebody, they can still go into a classroom.
If, it depends on what you're saying here is,
I think
you know,
it's risky.
so there's a difference between a visitor and a volunteer. A visitor can come supervised and come, and there are essentially every visitor on campus is supervised. And essentially, every volunteer is also supposed to be supervised. So you're just, the volunteers, we know have a more extensive interaction with kids than a visitor who's standing in the back of the classroom, observing what's happening, walking you to, introduce you to, or going to observe an event on campus is different than interacting with
Does
kids.
the person get a report back as to what the issues are too, similar to a credit report? So if there's
Everybody can request one. That I know only
Okay.
because of all the background checks that does with nuclear.
We have
and nuclear
parents who are
and-
police officers, do we make them go through this too?
If they're a volunteer, they
Go
they
back
already
up.
have it, so for example,
Right.
they just go show your card, they've got a more extensive
Right,
background
right,
check,
right, right.
that's all they have.
Well, I mean, your firefighters, police officers, EMTs have all had,
Teachers.
if they're
and
carrying,
other
if they're
districts.
carrying an active certification card and you verify that they're active, they've passed. So do we spend the money to do that again? Because, for example, like,
If
you have a
people already
state,
have the appropriate clearance, we don't
Right.
need to do that.
so your finger, like, if you're EMT in the state of Arizona, your fingerprints are on file, you have to be fingerprinted. They continue to check that every time you research. They check, and they'll reissue you a card unless you have some disqualifier. So if we have a police officer on the board, or you have an EMT on the board, or you have a doctor on the board, they've all fingerprint, do they need to go through this? Or they already have a medical clearance in the state, which allows them to be in a medical room?
I'll
with the child.
bring back what's on the volunteer one, and
Uh-huh.
there's something you think is missing from that, then we can entertain that.
I mean, I think if somebody has a state medical certification
Well,
there,
the point is here is if you already have one, it just speaking up.
it's just money.
I mean, it's not causing anybody any more harm or good, it's just, the district's gonna shot a little more money, make sure it's on point.
So you'll put something together, Dr. Shuck? And
Based
I'll
on,
send that back.
Chris
Mr. Volunteer, I'll take a stab
Yeah.
at it, and, get some support with Chris Thomas.
Can we talk about that credit check on there, or is that not part of the?
Yeah, can we?
Oh, come on.
Is anybody in the district, do we do credit checks on anybody? Okay.
You know, especially when you have pandemics and stuff, you're a great teacher, but you had now you're gone.
Funny.
I just wanted to make
Volunteer,
sure,
yeah.
if we're gonna say, all right, board members have to be fingerprinted, if we're doing credit checks on any
Yes.
employees,
Yeah.
then I would say it's the same
I don't
thing.
even think credit
But
check,
if we're
I hate
doing
the
it.
fact you use it for car insurance or anything else.
I
When I had great credit, and I sold my businesses, and a part of that was I had to pay off all the loans, which is in the millions. My credit went to 510.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I lost all my credit line.
All right,
It was awful.
so Dr. Shuffle put something together. Item 2.5, this is another one that I noticed that we don't have in our policy, and this is board members having romantic relationships with district employees. We have one for employees to employees. We have one for a board member and a spouse, Mr. Jensen. We don't have anything, no mechanism for a board member to a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
Yeah, and we could, potentially the reason, I was thinking about this. The reason they restrict the stuff between a spouse, and, for example, an employee and a board member is for obvious reasons, because it creates a conflict. Potentially you can have that same conflict just through a relationship. Albeit it would have to be a substantial relationship, but we know where secrets are shared. So it's just one of those things. I think it's open for discussion. I come from a world where you never, especially as an executive or a board member, you don't do that.
Yeah, you just don't go there.
No, you absolutely, and matter of fact, someone gets let go.
Yeah, usually.
Someone.
Yeah.
And so, just because it's liability.
Right.
And,
That's why I wanted it in here, right? Of that, I just figured that if we can't rule on someone who's related to us, albeit whether it be an aunt, a brother, they can't even work for the district, right? Your spouse, then why is that not moved
well,
to the other one? Because it's the same thing, right? That you may not be married to an individual, but you still want to help them out.
and this is the conflict and can be the key, or the issue, so to speak. Okay, board member can't be removed,
Correct.
but the employee can.
That's correct.
So as a board member, we have to be very careful and cautious because we could cost somebody their job.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, of that, because that's what happened with this gentleman, right? Is that his spouse wanted to work, and he said, okay, rather than, so he resigned. She did a wonderful job, right? But that is it. That's the give and take part of it.
Somebody's gotta go.
That's-
and I don't
it's not
think-
it, right.
I don't think that's, for me, just through conflicts of interest and everything else I can think of, if you're having a serious relationship with somebody on staff, somebody's gotta take issue with it. Right? It's similar to what we do. I don't know who's gonna be the police on that exactly. It's almost like you have to leave it up to the administration to a certain
Well,
extent to decide.
as I read this, it's up to the individual board member to declare.
Yeah, but what if they
because-
don't?
What if they don't?
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the way
And how
I
do you
read
prove
this
it?
currently is that the policing of it is self-police.
Oh, it has to be to a certain extent, but this is the deal, and this is something that's just, we gotta be completely aware of the fact that if we're playing around where we're not supposed to be playing around, so to speak, and it becomes an issue, somebody's going home. And it puts the heavy burden on a board member, and it needs to be there.
Mhm. I agree 100%. As far as the policing of it, that's one of them things that those things just work themselves out,
I mean, most places
I'm
have
just-
one level of separation.
right?
It doesn't get hidden very far.
It just works. It's one of
What is
those
our,
things.
what's
that
our
just
staff
takes-
policy on it?
I did pull up, and I'm not sure it's in the staff, so that, could be a consideration by the board as well.
I think you're getting into some danger. I mean, you look at fire and police departments, as long as there's 1 degree of separation, 1 level, they allow
Yeah, but police departments, they're not the ones who are signing the checks.
Board
And-
member superintendent is a different
That would be a
level.
different level,
Yeah.
maybe, but
And,
I mean, the fire chief of the Phoenix Fire Department is married to a division chief. He was an assistant chief, and when she became chief, he stepped down one.
Most of the school district ones, I know there is, you cannot be supervised,
Right.
by that person.
Right, that's usually where the line's drawn.
But
Under
at the
direction.
highest levels of the organization, that's it's a totally different level of integrity of just.
Yeah, and I go back
And not
to
even a
just
serious
running-
relationship, you're not dating either.
I just go back to business, even dating, subordinates are off limits.
Yep.
And it was one of those things, I've seen it happen, I've had to do it. I've had to sit in and go, one of you gets to go home, you guys sit down and decide it because we're not doing this. And it was, it was a subordinate issue. Look, if I've got two employees that are in the same rank doing the same deal and they wanna date, I really don't care because someone have supervisory over another individual or making decisions. So, but when you get a supervisor or somebody up above, and by the way, the board member's the highest you can go. And there are situations where an employee could affect votes on a board. And it can, and I've seen it happen. So I do that whole subordinate thing, and to me, the board is at the highest level, and we shouldn't even be, in a weird way, it shouldn't even be a discussion.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
It
so
goes back to
obviously
the
wrong.
optics.
Yeah,
of
well,
this
well,
system.
it's just inappropriate.
What is proof of that? That's what I'm looking at. If this happens, the board member's not going because they're elected. So now we've essentially said the teacher's going.
Well, but that's not
How do you
necessarily.
prove
Not the case.
But that's not
I mean,
necessarily
people
true,
talk, and
because if you really care about the person, there's a real relationship. And I would suggest that probably 9 times out of 10, the board member would do the right thing and probably resign. That's the way I see it. And by the way, if you're abusing your position as a board member to go play around with the staff and you really don't care, I mean, we have a big problem.
Right, sure.
So
So
the
you-
examples I put in there aren't really, they really aren't examples of policy. I was just giving some language that showed up in our student one, some language of conflict of interest, so do you want me to just work on this?
Can you take a stab at this one? I think you've heard kind of what everyone's had to say. And then we can possibly present that as a first reading.
Sure.
And if everyone, if people want to add something, then just go ahead and put that in there and send that off. That way, when it comes to the board for the first reading, then we can all take a look at it and see what everyone else's ideas are. So,
And what do you have for staff with romantic relationships?
when you're
When I
saying, are
look
you
at-
saying staff to staff?
Steps,
Yeah.
I think when I looked at it, I don't think I saw it in there for staff to staff. I can look it up here too. I'm just,
Because I think it should be some encompassing thing of, can a principal date a teacher?
I'll look for that
So
one.
that's, I thought that was in there.
It may be, I might have missed it.
So, and that's when I
I
said,
mean,
when I said staff to staff, I apologize. I meant exactly what Ryan talked about.
I'll look that up.
Supervisor,
Supervisory
Exactly.
relationship.
staff to
Yeah,
staff.
teachers can-
I know we have presidents that were married, so, or not presidents,
Teachers.
teachers and
Correct.
principals, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're on the same quote level, it's not typically a big issue. It's when you get the subordinate issue, you really gotta.
Alright,
Matter of fact,
I'll look on both.
I had to sit through 6 hours of training on that the other day.
And that's where I think it is.
I can't even have an employee, I can't even bring them into my office without a third party now. By the way, I don't want to.
Well, it's safer.
Exactly.
I must say that would, but.
Did you need any other direction on this?
I don't think so. I
Michelle?
don't think so.
Anyone else have anything else on this one? No? Okay. Carry
And
it.
trust me, I got bigger issues than the board that would have. You'd find me dead on the side of the road.
With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I move we adjourn.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. All together, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Show that we adjourned at
9:27.
9:27. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.